News that two bridges have collapsed in Russia. They are near the Ukrainian border. Now, investigators have said in the last few minutes that both of the bridges collapsed because of explosions.
Yeah, as you may remember, we've been mentioning this morning, 7 people died when a road bridge came down onto a moving passenger train, bringing with it several lorries in the southwestern city of Bryansk. And hours later, a railway bridge carrying a freight train collapsed in the Kursk region. And just in the past few minutes, the authorities there saying both of those were due to explosions. That's according to Russia's investigative committee.
A daring series of Ukrainian drone strikes hits military bases across Russia. Dozens of warplanes, some strategic bombers were targeted in one of Ukraine's biggest strikes on Russian soil since the war began. Here, the Defence Secretary tells the BBC Russia's carrying out cyber warfare attacks on the UK every day.
A message to Moscow about Britain's readiness to fight. The Defence Secretary says the UK will buy thousands of missiles and build new weapons factories under plans for the armed forces.
Hello there. Ukraine has carried out a daring series of drone attacks on military bases across Russia, apparently damaging or destroying more than 40 warplanes, some thought to be strategic bombers. It's one of the single biggest and most effective military strikes by Kyiv on Russian soil since the start of the war. Well, the scale of the operation was remarkable, with drone attacks on at least 4 airfields from western Russia across to Moscow and reaching the country's far east, thousands of miles from Ukraine. The operation was codenamed Spider's Web. Paul Adams has the very latest from Kyiv.
Far from Ukraine's borders, an attack of astonishing audacity. Russian strategic bombers picked off one by one by a fleet of drones. Ukraine calling this Operation Spider's Web, personally overseen by President Zelensky. One of Kyiv's boldest attacks so far, a reminder, despite Russia's overwhelming strength in numbers, that Ukraine is a resourceful, determined enemy. Sources say this took a year and a half to prepare. Dozens of drones smuggled into Russia, stored on wooden pallets, loaded onto trucks, driven to distant air bases and launched remotely. Swarms of drones picked up on social media from Siberia to the Arctic Circle. At a petrol station north of Irkutsk, a glimpse of the operation in progress. With smoke already rising behind, a drone emerges from the truck and heads off to join the attack. Moments later, another, and gunfire as police officers try to bring it down. From base to base, the smouldering aftermath testifying to the scope and ambition of the operation. Ukraine says it's done $2 billion worth of damage, a claim impossible to verify. Earlier, a different kind of wreckage, this the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia, after the country suffered another major drone and missile attack. Elsewhere, 12 Ukrainian soldiers were killed at a training base, the head of Ukraine's land forces tendering his resignation. What chance then for another round of peace talks due to take place in Istanbul tomorrow? Russian and Ukrainian delegations are expected to be there, but after 24 hours of mayhem, the omens for a breakthrough do not seem good.
Yeah, Paul, given that these peace talks are due to start tomorrow, what do you think the chances are of them getting anywhere following this attack?
You know, Clive, it's hard to exaggerate just how extraordinary and daring this attack was. We've gotten used to the idea of the Ukrainians being both determined and ingenious. The sinking of the Black Sea flagship, the Moskva, the attack on the Kerch Bridge, both back in 2022, and other episodes in the course of the war. But, you know, a colleague of ours from the Ukrainian service was talking to a Ukrainian politician, a government official recently, who said that the problem with Washington's view of Kyiv is that they, the Americans, have already decided that we have lost, and that everything that they do follows from that assumption. I think what we have seen today is an extraordinarily dramatic and emphatic statement by the Ukrainians that they have not lost, that they are still capable of inflicting enormous damage. Of course, we don't know exactly the extent of the damage, but enormous damage on Russia's military, and that no one should assume that they are simply the weaker party ready to roll over. That is the message that they are taking to the talks in Istanbul, which may, despite everything that's gone on in the last 24 hours, may still take place tomorrow.
Yeah, indeed. Fascinating. All right, Paul, thanks for that. Paul Adams there.
Well, some breaking news coming into us now on those Ukrainian attacks inside Russia we've been hearing about today. President Zelensky of Ukraine, he's just made a statement saying an absolutely brilliant result, Ukraine's independent result, 1 year, 6 months and 9 days from the start of planning to effective implementation. He calls it our longest range operation. That in relation to the drones that attacked air bases inside Russia, a large-scale drone attack and a long-planned mission by all accounts. And Zelensky very much celebrating that result, saying absolutely brilliant result. Ukraine's independent result, 1 year, 6 months and 9 days from the start of planning to effective implementation. Significant amount of drone attacks there that attacked Russian bomber planes. You've got live coverage and reaction to that you can follow live on our website and on the BBC mobile app. Significant drone attack by Ukraine on Russia.
Here, the Defence Secretary John Healey says Russia is attacking the UK every day using state-backed cyber warfare. Tomorrow, we'll see the publication of the government's long-awaited defence review, including new investment in 6 missile and munitions factories. Mr Healey's also confirmed it's an ambition, not a guarantee, to increase defence spending to 3% of GDP by 2034. Helen Catt has more details.
The UK's armed forces are operating in a world that is changing, facing new kinds of warfare and new threats. Tomorrow, the government will set out its assessment of those and how the UK should meet them in its strategic defence review.
It is a world of growing threats. It's growing Russian aggression. It's those daily cyber attacks. It's new nuclear risks, and it's increasing tension in other parts of the world as well.
The review will commit to procuring up to 7,000 new long-range weapons, like these Storm Shadow missiles, which the Defence Secretary went to see being produced. Spending on munitions is expected to hit £6 billion in this Parliament. There will also be an increased focus on drones and cyber warfare, and there's a promise of nearly 2,000 jobs created by spending £1.5 billion on 6 new defence factories.
This is about the readiness of our forces to fight and therefore to deter the wars of the future, but it's also about the readiness of our industry. That's the lesson from Ukraine. An armed forces is only as strong as the industry that stands behind it.
But large-scale plans take large-scale funding.
We have a historic commitment to increasing defence spending to 2.5% in 2 years' time. We haven't hit that level since Labour was last in power in 2010, and an ambition to meet 3% in the next Parliament.
So it's still just an ambition, that's not a guarantee?
This is enough to deliver the vision of the SDR, a vision that will see a transformation of our armed forces.
The Conservatives said they wanted to see spending hit 3% sooner and questioned Labour's commitment.
There is no firm commitment from the Treasury, and you've got Rachel Reeves, a Chancellor who has broken promise after promise after promise over the last 9 months. So why would we trust her to keep a promise that's 9 years away?
The Liberal Democrats have accused the government of dragging its feet on army recruitment after the Defence Secretary suggested troop numbers would not go up until the next Parliament. The defence review is expected to be big on ambition. The key is whether there will be action to match. Helen Catt, BBC News.